Last week, I spent some time diving into all the demos available for Steam Next, and I was sorely tempted to call this video Oops All Roguelikes, because this time there were so many roguelikes. And some of them were pretty fun. But luckily, I managed to find a few other options as well. So in this video, I'm breaking down the 8 demos I tried and giving some of my thoughts in addition to going over the gameplay. As I go through each of these titles, try to count all the roguelikes and keep in mind this is vibes in my experience with the demos rather than a full review. So first up, One Turn Kill. So the game whose name explains its core premise. This is a deck builder roguelike where you have one turn to kill the enemy. So if you've ever enjoyed putting together a deck in some sort of deck builder, maybe Magic the Gathering, where your entire goal is to play your deck in one turn to win, this is absolutely the game for you. And I really like the way that One Turn Kill breaks away from the deck builder formula. For example, you don't have mana effects. You do not gain mana every turn, you don't spend mana. Instead, your cards have a draw cost, meaning your deck also functions as your health pool. Because remember, you have one turn to kill the enemy, so there's no real point in having a health pool. How this functions in practice? Well, if a card costs 4, you draw 4 cards, gaining new cards to play, but also that means your deck now has 4 less cards in it, so you're that much closer to decking out. And on my first time through, each of the fights was pretty easy. As long as I built around some basic synergies, I won without an issue. The thing is, after you win the first time, you're back at the start, and you need to go through again, because this is in fact a roguelike deck builder. And now the enemies are getting serious, bigger health pools, more bosses, and special abilities. Which makes One Turn Kill feel a lot more like a puzzle game where you have to tailor your approach to the encounter. A good example of this is the demo's second boss, where for every third card you play, junk cards are added to your deck. Which is both a blessing and a curse, because if you play too many zero-cost cards early on, you'll flood your own deck with junk and be unable to draw the damage cards that you need to win. So in fact, you want to play all of your inefficient high-cost spells at the start to draw most of your deck, and then leave the junk sitting at the bottom, which now you don't have to worry about decking out, because every time you play more cards, you're generating more junk. In short, it's a cool concept, I like the twist it puts on the genre, and I've definitely wishlisted this, so I'm probably going to check it out later. Next up we have Escape from Duckov, and I'm not a fan of the PvPvE extraction genre, mostly because of the PvP part. With a name like Escape from Duckov, this is a demo that I had to try. And as far as I can tell, it takes a lot of inspiration from Escape from Tarkov. Then it repackages them as a purely PvE game, where you play as a well-armed duck fighting against, well, mostly better-armed ducks and sometimes duck-like creatures. The game has some light survival elements with things like hunger and thirst, plus basic FPS elements like hip firing versus ADS, but overall it was very easy to get into even as someone who doesn't play a ton of either of those genres. Now, in my first couple runs, inventory space was super punishing. But once I unlocked a couple extra bag slots, I felt like I was finally getting into the swing of things. I'd be taking down enemies, looting their stuff, then dying, going back to retrieve my stuff. I'd be mostly successful, explore just a little bit too close to the sun, and die again. But at least none of these deaths felt very punishing. It was pretty easy to get basic stuff off of enemies, even if I didn't recover my gear after I died, so I was steadily making progress, and accumulating what felt like a small fortune to spend on upgrades. Now, I wouldn't say I was very good at Escape from Duckov, and as a result, I don't think I got that far into the game. Despite that, it was pretty fun. Yeah, I died a lot, but before I knew it, I'd spent over 2 hours on the demo, and I wanted to do just one more run to get my stuff back. So this one I'd recommend, even if you're not really into shooters or extraction games. Next up, Moonlighter 2: The Endless Vault. This is the game that I had the highest hopes for. And you know what? It ended up being my favorite of the entire demo. Because I enjoyed both the original Moonlighter and Digital Sun's recent RTS Cataclysmo. The original Moonlighter blended a very simple shop sim with Zelda-style dungeon crawling, which led to a fun gameplay loop because you were alternating between 2 different playstyles. Now, Moonlighter 2 feels a little bit different, as they're more heavily leaning into the roguelike elements, which is awesome. They've also leveled up both the dungeon crawling and shop sim elements, fleshing them out with more mechanics. For the dungeon crawling sections, you go through randomly generated levels. Most of these have enemies to fight, some of them have trap gauntlets to avoid. But when you get to the end of a level, you either get a treasure chest, where you play around with some relics, or you get a power-up, maybe there's a shop, and then you choose the next place to go. Now, another interesting feature is the fire flowers that, when attacked, release volleys of projectiles that let you deal with tricky enemies with ease. Will's also been practicing his combat skills. He now has his melee attacks, very familiar if you've played the first game, a ranged shot that charges up as you hit enemies, which by the way reminds me a lot of Hyperlight Drifter. That is absolutely a good thing. A dodge roll, useful for avoiding damage, and a backpack bash that does massive damage to staggered foes. And there's a lot of cool little interactions, like some enemies fly up into the air, you can shoot them to knock them down. Certain enemies charge, and if you get them to crash into something, they're staggered, so you can use the backpack bash. All of this makes the combat feel way more dynamic. And I feel like I've only barely scratched the surface since the demo only has one region, 2 weapons, and very limited gearing options. Acquiring relics is also way more interesting, because a lot of the relic curses specifically encourage you to interact with them by burning other relics. Some relics trigger special effects when burned, such as transforming into a copy of a different relic. Also, when burned, some relics give bonuses to other relics. So you're now constantly going, all right, do I want to keep this because this is the highest money, or do I want to use it as fuel to turn one relic into something else? Gone are the days of simply picking the highest value and going. Now I'm filling my inventory with 1 coin driftwood, and then by the end of the run, turning it into something super valuable. The shop sim elements are also way more detailed. They've moved away from the haggle system, and at first I thought I'd miss that. But instead you now have the roguelike element, where you gain perks for completing sales during the day. These reset as soon as Will goes to bed and there's a new day. There are also some little mini-games where you can clean up the shop to get cosmetics, or raise a relic's value by hitting X at the correct time. And you know what? The system that replaced haggling is pretty cool as well. Instead, you can now apply different boosts to the sales. These are either the blue boost, which is just a flat amount of money added to the price, very good for things that have a low value, or the red one, which adds a percentage of a value. And since these interact with the daily perks, you can get some crazy combos. You can also stack them up. Maybe take a low value relic, add flat to it, then add the percent. All of a sudden, you're going to be making a huge sale. There are some relics that I sold for double or even triple their initial price just by abusing the system. It's really fun, it's way more engaging, and you know what? Sometimes change is absolutely good. Now last up, one of the things that I remember from the original Moonlighter was the boss fights. They're pretty simple, but very cool. And each of them were really thematic. And you know what? I suspect there's going to be some really good fights in Moonlighter 2 as well. Because if you complete the demo, you get access to a special boss fight, and this guy is tough. He has a lot of health and quite a few phases to learn. There are on-screen obstacles to avoid for an entire phase, projectiles that you can reflect back using the backpack bash, and patterns to learn. And so overall, I really enjoy the work that Digital Sun has put into making each of the gameplay loops far more interactive. As of the recording of this video, the demo is sitting at mixed on Steam. But if anything that I've said so far is of interest to you, don't let that scare you off. Yes, it's pretty different from the original Moonlighter, in ways that might not be for everyone. But personally, I really like the direction the game's headed in, and I'm absolutely going to be playing it when it releases. Then we've got TRON Catalyst, which throws you right into the story with a mysterious mission to deliver a flashing package. One explosion later, you're stuck in a core prison/battle arena. The combat's simple but functional, which means I spend a lot of time matching attack, then dodging behind enemies to do it again. Now, I played the game on the default difficulty, which did feel a little bit too easy, but ultimately this didn't matter much to me, as it's the story and the vibe of the world that drew me into the game. I'll admit, I have seen the original TRON movie, but I was pretty young and I don't remember much of it, beyond a vague feeling of, wow, virtual reality seems really cool, which was from a time before virtual reality was something mainstream enough that you could just go down to GameStop and buy a headset for a couple $100 to experience it. Oh, sorry, I mean buy it off of Amazon, because GameStop's not really a thing anymore either. But as far as I can tell, this game absolutely does the world of TRON justice. And I enjoyed the way that TRON Catalyst presents its story, because one of the game's main mechanics is time looping. You take some knowledge back in time and redo things to achieve a different, usually better outcome. And this avoids the annoyingness of Groundhog's Day style time loops that often bother me so much in other games, while also giving you something new to explore each time you loop back. But unlike a lot of other games on this list, TRON Catalyst isn't a roguelike. Or maybe it takes a few roguelike elements with the story looping, but if anything, it reminds me a lot more of an on-the-rails Cyberpunk 2077. But again, I could imagine the full game turning you loose into this RGB world of TRON to just explore, interact with side characters, and learn more about the mystery that EXO got caught up in. So I'm going to wishlist this and keep an eye on it in the future because color me intrigued. So those are the 4 games that really clicked with me. But now I'm going to talk about 4 that I'm not so sure on. I'm not saying all of these are bad. In fact, In most cases, far from it, but there's some things that I'm concerned about, or they might just not be for me. The first of which is Runeborn. And at this point, saying something is like Balatro but is a bit of a meme. However, Runeborn is Balatro if it was a matching game. No, put the pitchforks down. I have proof. In Balatro, you try to match cards by suit and number using rules loosely based off of poker. In Runeborn, you match runes either horizontally or diagonally in a V-shape. The game always checks all of your available rune lines, so the score gets pretty crazy quickly, but at its core, you are still matching. And in Balatro, you have jesters, who provide score or multipliers to boost your cards, potentially making unusual combinations more viable. Runeborn has trinkets that do pretty much the same thing, increasing the base damage, or adding multipliers, some of which are generic, whereas others synergize with specific runes, require a match count, or completely transform your playstyle. So yes, Runeborn is a Balatro-like, taking a lot of systems and excitement from that game and applying them to the matching game genre. Once you stack some bonuses up, the damage numbers get pretty crazy. I was one-shotting plenty of bosses as I went through the demo, or doing absolutely massive damage to the final boss, and every time the next boss would be scarier and scarier with even bigger numbers to deal with. Plus, since each rune line is calculated with every cast, you have to pay attention to both the horizontal and the diagonal. It was fun to stack up the multipliers, and I did end up replaying for a few rounds because I wanted to see if I could get a better score. Yeah, there's a leaderboard, and that's just a super dangerous thing in a game like this. But at the same time, the feeling I came away with was not, I want to play more Runeborn, it was, maybe I should give Balatro a second chance. So yeah, if I feel like ruining a month of my life in the best possible way, maybe I'll go do that. Then we have Morbid Metal, a fast-paced roguelike with flashy combat that reminds me a lot of Devil May Cry. But I am a little worried that this one's going to be style over substance. Now, let's start with the positives, because one thing I really enjoyed was the combat and the ability to swap between different characters. For the demo, you have two options. First, the faster, ninja-like character wielding a katana, who can unleash a flurry of slashes that turn into projectiles and bounce between enemies. You can also dash to foes, or use your ultimate to select and annihilate a single foe. Now, the second character you get is slower and heavier, but oh man does he have a lot of AoE damage. He has a horizontal whirl which hits pretty much everything around him, and a vertical slash that can knock enemies into the air, which is especially effective at dealing with shielded foes. Plus, his ultimate is a charge that's great at clearing entire rooms. Something else that stood out to me about the combat is the use of time slows, because when you're using some abilities, you get a short time slow to properly aim it at foes. Similarly, when you execute a perfect dodge, there's a moment where you can hit your attack button to unleash a devastating counterattack. I really like this because very often in faster-paced games, I don't feel like I have time to think. I'll just fire stuff off as quickly as possible and go, well, if I hit my buttons harder, surely I'll be doing better. But here, there's enough of a pause, enough of an interruption to allow for that moment of reflection to say, yes, I'm going to aim at this guy because he is the threat, while not being too disruptive to the overall gameplay. And movement is fast-paced and fluid as well. Before I knew it, I was jumping from grapple point to grapple point and absolutely flying through the levels. Plus, after you defeat foes, you get a random power-up, so you constantly feel like you're getting stronger throughout the run. But where my concern comes in is with the game's roguelike elements. Because the levels felt like I was running through a lot of empty terrain, then reaching an arena where I fight a group of enemies, then I kill them, get a power-up, and I run through a bunch of empty terrain until I get to the next arena and fight more enemies. And there wasn't a ton of enemy variety either. So in short, the combat feels great, but I have some concerns about the overall roguelike structure and the replayability of the game. This is one to keep an eye on, but I wouldn't say I'm fully sold yet. Then we have Dice Legends, a deck builder roguelike with some controlled random chance. Each turn, you roll dice and use them to activate your cards. Some cards require a specific roll, such as a dice with 1 to 3 on it so that you can inflict vulnerability on an enemy, or a dice with 4 to 6 to use a pretty hard-hitting attack. Others just scale with numbers so bigger is better. After most fights, you're rewarded with a new card, and after particularly tough foes, you get an artifact that can increase your power, recover health, or add defense for the remainder of a run. Sometimes you also encounter a shop where you can spend your gold on items, potions, cards, etc., or a bonfire where you can either rest to restore health or practice to increase your damage. So on paper, all of this sounds very up my alley. But something just didn't click, and I think there's a few reasons for that. First up, the items themselves aren't very interesting. they just provide basic stats like +3 damage or -2 damage taken. Yes, they are very powerful, but they don't change how you play. I much prefer when artifacts are build enabling and allow different playstyles so each run feels just a little bit different from the others. Slave Aspire is especially good at this, by the way. And the deck building felt really samey in the demo as well, possibly because there just wasn't enough content available. Last up, the game's visual style didn't really mesh with me, because the backgrounds were a little bit too detailed, and that made the pixel art feel very busy. But that's a personal thing and very much a nitpick. So yeah, I think I'm going to give a pass to Dice Legends, even though it looked like it was up my alley initially. Now for this next one, just watch the intro sequence for this game. The early part of a demo for Mio, Memories in Orbit, perfectly introduces you to the game's decaying world, quirky automation characters, and overall vibe. I'm reminded a lot of Nier Automata here, which makes me think there's going to be a lot of tragedy behind the events that caused the world to fall into decay. And while the story did draw me in, unfortunately the game didn't quite click with me. First up, it's a precision platformer. As such, you need to spend a lot of time precisely controlling your jumps, which I suck at, and I found the death system to be pretty frustrating. Because if you just fail a jump, it's not that big of a deal. You're usually put right about back where you were. But if you die, you're sent back to the central save point. Yes, some shortcuts do unlock, but I found the run back to be very tedious, especially if I was dying over and over and over again. Plus, on the first boss that I fought, it seemed a little buggy where sometimes if I hit him during his attack sequence, he'd rubber band back. He didn't seem to be able to damage me while doing this, which is good, but it still was very janky and made me think he was going to damage me, which isn't exactly the most fun experience. So yeah, Memories in Orbit, it's cool. I like the world building, the storytelling, and the art style. Ultimately, I didn't finish the demo because I found the run back to be tedious, but if you are vibing with this game, please do not let what I am saying stop you from checking it out, because I think it's really cool and a lot of people are really going to love it. And so, those are the 8 games that I checked out from the last Steam Next. Out of everything, the one I'm most looking forward to is Moonlighter 2. I enjoyed the original, and the sequel does a lot of cool stuff to make the trading and the dungeon delving more interesting. The most pleasant surprise was Escape from Duckov, a game that I didn't think I liked, but it turned out to be pretty fun. Now, the last Steam Next overwhelmed me with more interesting demos than I could play. I think there's something like 20-ish on my shortlist, which maybe isn't that much of a shortlist. But this time I was sufficiently whelmed. I only had about 10 demos on the list, and I spent a lot more time scrolling past stuff that just didn't grab me. And if you're wondering what happened to the other 2, one of them was just really boring, so after about 10 minutes I turned it off, and the other crashed a bunch, so I couldn't get good footage. But hey, Steam Next is always a good time, and by the fall, maybe it'll be Oops All Looter Shooters instead. And so now I'm curious, are there any cool demos that you checked out during Steam Next? Let me know down below, because I'd like to check them out too. Also, if you didn't see my last Steam Next wrap-up, then check it out up in the card and down below. And hey, if you enjoyed this, do be sure to get subscribed and leave a like while you're down there so you can catch the next one. Now before I go, there's one more important question to answer. How many roguelikes was that? I'm going to say 5.75. Let me break down the math for you. 5 roguelikes. Easy, simple to understand. Escape from Duckov, I'm going to count that as 0.5. Technically not a roguelike, but you are dying and losing your stuff, so 0.5. And TRON Catalyst, 0.25. Why? The Time Rewind, sort of a roguelike. I know, not really, but I make the rules and that's the score. 5.75 roguelikes out of 8. And so thanks for watching, glad you enjoyed, I'll see you in the next one.